getting more money to help cope with the soaring consumer prices we are seeing everywhere.
Social Security benefits will rise by 8.7% next year. The remaining beneficiaries are widows, parents, spouses, or children.
And looking at the country as a whole, about 70 million retirees or disabled people, other recipients, will see a boost in their benefits.
There is a new official update on Ford stimulus checks. It's $3,500 in extra relief cash that you were actually eligible for. The 2022 holiday season will be a lean one for people who have enough on their financial plates. And just dealing with skyrocketing inflation alone, it's going to be tough. One option is to cut back on spending, another is to search for financial assistance from the government. So depending on factors like your income and household size, you might qualify for extra stimulus cash to help with bills. Millions of Americans already pay billions of dollars in state and federal taxes every year. So if you're a homeowner or a renter, you may be entitled to get some of the hard-earned money back. The Homeowners Assistance Fund, for example, is part of the American Rescue Plan. It provides up to $10 billion for every state in the country. The program was intended to help Americans avoid foreclosures and the loss of utilities during the crisis, but things have changed. Although the program is federally funded, funds are administered by the states. Residents of Arizona may apply online. You may qualify if you own and live in a home of Arizona as your primary residence, as well as if you experience financial hardship after January 21st, such as lost income or higher expenses due to the crisis. And according to officials, the Federal Homeowner Assistance Fund must be used by September 30th. The Arizona Department of Economic Security administers an emergency rental assistance program. It gives a lot of money to people with rent and utility bills and helps the Arizona renters impacted by the crisis. Now, those meeting eligibility requirements may receive up to $3,500 a month in stimulus cash. That's $3,500 of free stimulus money. The Colorado Department of Local Affairs has already used up its federal emergency rental assistance, and the cities of Boulder, Colorado, and Denver may still have funds available for you to get the money. Now, housing prices have also been on a tear since the crisis began. The underlying reasons for the dramatic rise in the cost of buying is that the nationwide prices are increasing. The further we get from the crisis, funds of some of these programs may become scarce. Now, friends, housing prices have been on a tear, and now the underlying reasons for the dramatic rise in this price is because of the Federal Reserve. Despite the biggest one-day drop since '81, a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage and home loan is still double what it was at the start of the year. The higher interest rate payments coupled with overvalued homes have caused a slump in the sale of existing homes. It's both good and bad news. Housing prices rose by 45% between January and June, and that's because 50% more than the run-up of the last housing market bubble. However, this time it doesn't look like it'll be a repeat of the 2008 housing crash. Mark Zandi, the chief economist, told reporters it doesn't look like he sees a housing collapse anytime soon because home prices will be bolstered by a couple of fundamentals: supply and improved lending practices. Furthermore, unlike the previous housing bust, both bank and household balance sheets are in a better situation because the work-from-home policies that were implemented at the beginning of the crisis allowed the migration of Americans from high-cost areas to lower-cost cities. The ultra-low mortgages already helped encourage this movement in an already limiting supply of available houses. So the increase in prices already slowed, and some of the most overvalued are now being seen as a correction. According to new data, over 90% of regional housing markets have a greater than 50% chance of housing losing value over the next year. Only 1% of the biggest housing markets have seen a drop so far. The rising prices and higher mortgage rates have cooled demand for existing homes, with homeowners priced out, which behind the deceleration prices. However, the market is still short on supply and likely to remain this way as builders cut back on this. So we're seeing that the need that President Biden doing more for the American people is a must.
Well, I certainly concur with Senator Schumer's in calling for our Republican colleagues to seriously negotiate an appropriations bill for 2023. As it stands, if we have a continuing resolution, it will be a disaster.
Yeah, any good news welcome at this point, right? Well, the news is that folks on Social Security will not have to file a tax return in order to get their federal stimulus check. Those are expected to be mailed out here within the next week or so. And the Treasury Department officials there announcing that Americans on Social Security or disability will no longer have to file taxes.
So more financial relief is on the way for millions of low-income households. The lawmakers have actually agreed to send out stimulus aid to those being impacted by the crisis. So Americans may actually qualify for monthly checks of up to $100. And with inflation at record highs, Americans are feeling the pain of higher prices. It's especially true when it comes to filling their gas tanks. And as of June 22, the average price of a gallon of gas was more than $5. In an effort to provide some sort of financial relief, the federal government has actually come up with several short-term options for assisting the public, while also addressing the larger short-term an issue of inflation at hand. Some of these ideas include tapping into emergency oil reserves as well as federal gas tax holidays to encourage more production out of the oil companies. One of the leading proposals at the moment is the Gas Rebate Act of 2022. It has been dubbed the gas stimulus. Similar to the stimulus checks that were sent out during the crisis, the gas stimulus check will be a series of checks sent to qualifying Americans. Now folks, listen to this. Each payment would be of actually $100, with an additional $100 for households and dependents. And for each month where the price of gas was higher than $4 a gallon, the eligibility requirements are less than $75,000 for single filers and less than $150,000 for joint filers. Many individual states have taken matters into their own hands and approved similar measures for their residents. For instance, in California, gas costs are considerably more than in other states. These are the plans to give relief checks of up to $1,000 for a qualifying family. In another group in North Carolina, the state senators are proposing giving every local licensed adult a one-time $200 stimulus payment. So the Bureau of Economic Analysis also reported today that an economic gauge that the Federal Reserve follows closely showed that inflation stayed strong in September, but mostly with expectations. So folks, the core personal consumption expenditures and price increase over 0.5% from the previous month and accelerated to 5% over the past year. It includes the cost of food and energy, and that rose by 0.3%. So this report comes as the Fed is prepared to enact its sixth interest rate increase of the year at its policy meeting next week, in an effort to combat inflation running at its fastest peak since the 40 years. And the Fed has been raising rates increasingly fast, and with increases totaling 3 percentage points thus far, Fed officials watch Friday's data points closely for clues and where costs are headed, particularly with a tight labor market in which there are one job every available worker. Americans just continue to pay more at the grocery store for surging food inflation shows no signs of slowing down, and that's something that's confusing a lot of people. Prices could keep rising well into next year, and experts are concerned about a threat of a recession coupled with high food prices, which rose last month even as the cost of gas, cars, and other products fell. And while the Fed interest rates are slowing demand for certain discretionary goods, people will always need to buy food, limiting the impact of monetary policy on prices. And according to The Hill, this issue with the supply chain is a problem, and farmers and food processors have reported difficulties, and something needs to be done. President Biden
Watt said the negotiations between the legislature and the governor delayed the timeline of the payments.
Exactly who would get the rebates and